question. This question has come up a couple of times, and I wanted to do a short video on it. And that's the question is about nymph fishing for bass, for largemouth bass in lakes. And I did in my book. There is a sidebar article. I've got sidebar articles of little topics that I kind of, for one reason or another, wanted to pull out. And in my book, there's this little sidebar article on nymph fishing, which talks more about what I do, when I use it, that type of thing. It's not a new original idea with me. I mean, going way back, here's an article way back in the day. This tells you kind of how old I am. 1981. This is when scientific anglers were doing these magazines. I used to really pick them up. I loved them. They got a lot of great articles. Still to this day, many of them are relevant. But it was an article by John Gierach. Let me page to it here. Nymphs, big and buggy are best. And this is bass fishing. It's by John Gierach. And so it's that idea of fishing big buggy nymphs. Here's another one, 1985. This article is by Dave Whitlock, called Nymphing for Bass. And this article, I did find it on the internet. If you search it up, you can find a reproduction of that article. So a lot of my thinking about this was formed by some of that early reading. And so I want to talk just briefly about it here. Here is my nymph box that I use for bass, and I'm going to be tying some of these flies. I'm going to do some tying tutorials on some of these flies. In fact, I'm going to load one along with this video up on Facebook, so you'll have one to go to right away. So I want to talk a little bit about rigging, just briefly. I'm not going to go too deeply into this. I did a series of videos this summer on rigging. And I don't know, they were outdoors, and they were at my boat, and maybe the close-ups weren't quite as good as I would have liked. So maybe I may redo some of these. But first of all, modern fly lines come with loops. So I just want to do a quick little aside on that loop. I've seen occasionally stuff online suggesting that you should cut this loop out and do something else here. I've seen, and two things I've seen: nail knot, or perhaps an Albright knot. I posed a question to a friend of mine with one of the major fly line companies. The strength of this loop exceeds the tensile strength of the fly line itself. So consequently, you're not going to put anything on the end of this line that's going to be better than this loop. You're just not. And also, you're not, when you do a knot to knot, a marriage knot, or whatever you want to call it, it kind of looks like a little square knot, that's going to be as smooth a connection going through your guides as you're going to get. And I'm a guy who used to go nail knots, needle nail knots. I never did use an Albright knot. But all those things are going to have a bigger bump coming through the fly line than this. So my suggestion to you is don't cut this off. Rig your lines, however you're rigging, for whatever you're rigging for, use these loops. And the reason is so let's talk first about why would I want to fish some of these flies. So one of the conditions that happens in the summer in a lot of the warm water, Michigan lakes that I fish, and I think this is pretty common to most bodies of water, you get a little cold front come through and everything slows down. And so the bass are not coming up to your top water stuff. One of the real clues to this is if you notice your shoreline activity has gone away or is really slowed down. A normal, stable summer condition along the shore, you'll see small bluegill that'll be active. You may even see some insect activity, some dragonflies, that kind of thing. And if you hit a day where you've had a cold front come through, a little rain shower, whatever, and suddenly you go out and you look, and the small fish are not in the shallow water. They're just kind of nothing there. Or maybe there's one or two just kind of lazily. Things have slowed down. And what happens is, it's not that that degree or two of water temperature affects the bass so much. It's just that it reduces the bass's feeding opportunities. There's not as much activity, and so the bass just naturally slows down during that time and conserves energy. And so they're just simply not quite as active. But if you take one of these nymphs, and then what I do is I pair it. Okay, this here is a Rio Versaleader. It's basically on a 25-pound core, mono core, and I'm not going to go through rigging this too much. I'll do another video and I'll show you all the rigging and knots. But I'll take off my topwater leader, my monofilament bass leader, and I'll put one of these on. And so this is 10 foot long, so it's got a slow sink to it. These are designed for spay, but I'll tell you what, on the rods that I use, typically the heavier weight rods, those rods can cast line weights of 1 or 2 weights higher than, in fact, a lot of the modern bass lines and stuff are already a line weight or 2 heavier. And so sometimes I've found that adding one of these actually improves the castability of the fly rod rather than detract from it. So you've got, this is an option. You know, here's one that I've just started using, Scientific Anglers. You know, you'll notice, see, it tells you the length, it tells you the core. The core is 25-pound test, and the sink rate is 3 inches per second. And so this is another good one. One of the interesting things about the Scientific Anglers ones is, let me kind of put this up there. There we go. I think you can see it. They put a little swivel at the end. They knot a little swivel at the end, and then you can just knot your tippet right to that. This one happens to be an intermediate sink. The one I just showed you is the 3 inches per second. So you can manage these to the sink rate that you need to fish at. Then what you can do is come off the shore a little bit, because remember, these fish have moved off the shore a little bit. Cast out, kind of match whatever your tip is to the water depth, and then fish real slow. Keep the tip of your rod right at the water, and just real slow strips. We're just moving that nymph slowly along the bottom, so when a fish sees it, they don't have to expend much energy to come up and grab it. And so oftentimes when a cold front comes through, that's a way to kind of get a few fish. You're probably not going to get as many fish as when they're very active, and you can throw some topwater bugs in the morning and really get those active fish. But it's a way of getting a few fish. One of the ways of getting a few fish when things have slowed down. The other thing I do with this is I have a rod, typically a 6-weight rod, in my boat that I keep rigged with a nymph pattern. And so now I'm going along and I'm fishing and I'm casting some bass bugs, topwater bugs, and what'll happen is the fish will come, and either he will miss the bug, or maybe my own mistake, I strip or set too quick, something. Whatever happens, he came to the fly, but he didn't get it. Didn't get hooked. If he got hooked, that's game over. If he got hooked and come off, that's game over. But if he didn't get hooked, oftentimes I swing the boat back around, give him a moment to settle back in there, come around, I'll grab that 6-weight rod with that nymph on the end, I'll cast right up into that same area, let it sink. Now this time, because he's a little more active, I'll do a little more active swim out from shore. But oftentimes that will be that little thing that will trigger him, and he'll come and he'll eat it. And so that's and normally they will not come back. You can go around and whatever, and he's not going to come back to that topwater fly. But if you swing around with a nymph, that might be a way of getting a fish that you otherwise wouldn't have been able to hook. So anyway, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be doing some tutorials on these flies. Casual dress, that video is up right now. I'm going to be doing some of these on Dave Whitlock's squirrel hair nymphs, these over on this side here. Whoops, on this side right here. Dave Whitlock's. Down here in the bottom, I have some Poly Rossborough nondescripts, and I do a couple kind of interesting things with that. And then the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do another fly that can be used for the same purpose, our woolly buggers. And so I'm going to do a little tying tutorial on woolly buggers and maybe show you a little twist that you might not have thought of in tying your woolly buggers. So, stay tuned. And you start off with this casual dress nymph. And again, I'll do the time-lapse video here on Facebook. The instructional video will be over on my YouTube channel. And so if you go over there and you haven't done so, hit subscribe. And we'll see you next time.